Yeah, my name's Betsey. I'm a PhD student at the University of Northern Colorado in sport and exercise science in the concentration area of sport administration. I was born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina, in the heart of the Blue Ridge. I literally grew up no further than 10 minutes from the Parkway, and it was just, in hindsight, such a privileged upbringing to grow up in such a beautiful place that I still think about every day. I literally have zero memory of never not being in sports. I think my mom, I'd have to check for sure, but I think the youngest you can enroll your kid in a soccer camp, once a week playing little scrimmages on a Saturday, was just before you turn 4. So she signed me up immediately. She actually was my coach for a lot of those younger years, which was always fun. And so I started playing soccer and pretty much never looked back. I played soccer recreationally and then at a little bit more of a competitive travel level until middle school. And then in middle school, I decided, I think I want to try some other stuff. I still played soccer, but I had a friend who was going to try out for the cross-country team and just decided, hey, that doesn't sound too crazy. A little running a couple of days a week. And so I tried out for the cross-country team in 7th grade, and then I started running, and that was just what I did. I ran and I played soccer. That was, if I wasn't running for cross country, I was running for soccer, and then when I wasn't running for soccer, I was running for cross country, and it was such a great experience.
So what drew you to come out west?
God, that's such a great question. Well, I knew very quickly into my master's degree that I wanted to teach. Getting in front of a classroom and having those experiences were really, really affirming for me. So I said, okay, that means I got to do a PhD. And there were several faculty at NC State that had PhDs from several different universities, one of which was University of Northern Colorado. And my oldest brother lived in Denver at the time and still does. And I think the furthest I had ever been was maybe Oklahoma City prior to moving here. And the idea of being in, such driving distance of the mountains and getting to explore out west for a couple of years while I got my doctoral degree it was too good of a deal to pass up. But ultimately, I felt really called to come out here and explore and get just, a feel for a really cool new place that I had never been before. And so I just realized I really want to pursue this line of research that helps us understand why recreation and activity is important for people with disabilities and why we should be prioritizing it. And so going forward, I'd like to keep that. I think it's really important to continue pushing down this door of, recreational spaces are for able-bodied people, because they aren't there for everybody. Everybody benefits from recreation and activity. That's just the bottom line. And arguably, we could say that people with disabilities benefit more. They have less social opportunities, and it's really important to be able to build those networks and communities. I want to say shortly before my 17th birthday, I was officially diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a hypermobility collagenetic disorder, and it causes all of my joints to be hypermobile. So I frequently dislocate my shoulders, my knees, my hips, my ankles. Just simple activities like walking and taking my sweatshirts on and off. And so from probably 16, when I quit the soccer and the cross-country teams, till my senior year of undergrad, so about 2021, I was not very physically active outside of, taking the occasional required health course and going to a yoga class here and there. But I had been told by a doctor that I was going to keep hurting myself if I was exercising, to the degree that I had been when I was initially diagnosed. So I was very fearful of exercise for a while. But my siblings and my family were all still very active. So I want to say it was the summer before my 21st birthday, my mom called and said, one of my friends talked me into doing this really crazy thing called a Spartan race, and I'm gonna sign you up to do it with me. I was like, what? I have not been inside of a gym in 3 years, and I haven't run further than from my car to my front door if it was raining, and even longer than that. But she signed me up, and I was like, okay, I guess I gotta get ready to do this 5K with obstacles and mud. So I got back in the gym and kind of realized that, wow, this actually feels great. Like, I'm happier and I feel better, and I actually stopped dislocating my joints as frequently, because turns out that with my type of collagenetic disorder, the less exercise I do, my connective tissue and fascia will continue to erode. So I need strong muscles that will help keep my joints in place. So by not exercising, I was actually doing myself a really big disservice. So I got back in the gym, and then that summer I ran my first Spartan race with my mom, and I was hooked. It was awesome. That race was absolutely thrilling. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I remember at one point I had the 60-pound bucket full of rocks on my shoulder, and I was walking around like a little loop, and I thought, this is so rewarding, and I think I want to do this more. So after that first race, I signed up for another Spartan later that year, and thought, well, okay, to get training, I want to do a 5K in between that. So I signed up for just a small 5K and found that I was really enjoying training and running. And so I then signed up to run a 10K, and then I signed up to run a 10-miler, and then I signed up to run a half marathon. And the races just kept getting longer and longer and more frequent. And then I found myself thinking, well, if I can run a half marathon, I can probably run a full marathon. So I signed up to run a marathon. And then I had a very good friend who does ultra marathons, and he basically helped me convince myself, well, if I can run a marathon, I can run an ultra marathon. And then in between all that, I just said, well, if I can do that, I can do anything. So I started running triathlons and beasts, so Spartans that are half marathons, and I just really started to challenge myself to not be intimidated by the size or the length of a race, but rather to be excited. And that's kind of the approach I've taken since. I just try and spend as much time as I can in my very busy life as a PhD student exercising in the gym, doing something that feels good for my body and feels good for my brain, mostly. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think part of losing or going without recreation and physical activity for several years, at the time I didn't realize that it was probably a major contributor into my overall life satisfaction. But when I started getting back into the gym and exercising, I realized that I was a lot happier with myself, and I was a lot happier with everything else in my relationships, in my friendships, in my just general day-to-day life. I was a better person. And so for me, recreation isn't about, being the best or doing the hardest thing possible. It's about challenging myself to do things that 5-6 years ago I would have told you were impossible. And, coming to terms with the fact that nothing's impossible, it's just hard. And I think that's a life lesson that sports really gives everybody, recreation gives everybody, because if you're doing it right, There are going to be days where showing up is really challenging. And the last thing you want to do is wake up and go for that 3-mile run. But those are the days that it's the most rewarding to go out and say, okay, I'm just going to do it.
Thanks for watching another episode of Wreck Yourself. I'm your host, James Gould. I'm professor of tourism management at the University of Northern Colorado. I hope we've inspired you to explore. And of course, feel free to check out the links below for specific information on recreation resources, our guests, and our partners. Also, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Until we see you next time, be sure to wreck yourself.